Hi guys, and welcome to the channel. Today we will be talking about the latest video that Sony released regarding Spider-Man on the PlayStation 5, and it showed off the performance mode. I believe the video was in 4K 60. So let's take a look at that and kind of see what our thoughts are. So some of the footage I'm going to be referencing is from another YouTuber, which I'll link to his page down here, and it's regarding he's done a really good job. His link is El Analista de Bits. I think it's a Spanish user, but he does a lot of comparison analysis. So if you go to his YouTube channel, you'll see that he does a lot of comparisons between the different platforms. But he had a really good one on the Spider-Man on PlayStation 5 comparison to the PS4 version, which I'll grab some snapshots from his video, from there. But what's interesting is I've played games on PC, and on your graphics card, in order to get high frame rates, you're going to have to toggle your some of your quality when it comes to texture, shadow, lighting, and stuff like that. So and his video does a great job of doing side-by-side comparisons, but I wanted to do a deeper dive into some of the little things that he talked about, but probably didn't go into full detail. So we'll go a little bit more deeper dive into some of the comparison shots. But let me go ahead and fast forward to there was a scene in the comparison video that was really interesting, and he did point it out. So let me see if I can fast forward to that shot. So right now he's just showing the PS4 footage, and man, Spider-Man on PS4 looks amazing already, right? So you would figure that with the PlayStation 5, you would see some pretty cool enhancements. So one of the big things is draw distance, but let me fast forward to a scene here. See if I can capture it right here. There we go. So he does point out that with the PlayStation 5 in performance mode, where you're getting 60 frames per second, you lose some of the shadow textures, and he shows it here. So if I go back a little bit, let me rewind. Here's the PS4 version. Now you can see my mouse cursor here. Now look at how lively the street is, right? Look at the shadow of the buildings. You see how many cars. So the whole city is like a living, breathing environment. You see a lot of cars. You see the trees here. Focus on the trees here, and focus on the cars here. And I'll go ahead and fast forward, or I'll just play this clip to the point where he's gonna transition over to the PS5 version, right? So now look at the PS5 version. Look at, there's no vehicles in the street, in the city. There's a few up here, but it's not as busy, heavy traffic, and this is meant to excuse me, portray. So this section here was meant to kind of show a populated city with a lot of traffic, and in the PS5 version you don't see that. And then look over here and where the tree is. You see how the foliage is much lighter, and you probably won't see the shadow as much. Let me see if I can fast forward. There we go. So look at the screenshot now, right? Now look at the trees and look at the environment. So in order to get that performance 60 frames per second, you're going to have to sacrifice somewhere. So you're going to have to reduce the amount of rendering that's happening in the scene in order to get the 60 frames per second, right? So that's one aspect of it, which, if it's my guess, and this is my assumption here, is that performance mode to get the 60 frames, you're going to sacrifice a lot when it comes to just the visual fidelity, right? So if you want a pretty looking Spider-Man on the PlayStation 5, you're gonna have to play it in just the non-performance mode. So I believe the non-performance mode should be 30 frames locked, which is still not bad. You can still play the game, in 30 frames per second. But if you've played any game in 60 frames or higher, you're so used to that high frame rate and that fidelity of movement that it's really tough to go back. But is it still playable in 30 frames? Yeah. So in the 30 frames per second mode, you're going to see probably the most visual fidelity that you're going to get on the PlayStation 5 for Spider-Man, right? So if you don't need that 60 frames and you want that game to look pretty, you're going to have to play it in that mode, right? And not performance, because you'll get, the better textures, the higher resolution, you'll get the shadows, and you're not going to get ray tracing. I don't believe in. You will get ray tracing in the high fidelity mode. You won't get you won't get ray tracing in performance mode. So in the 60 frames per second, you're not going to get ray tracing, and that's pretty evident when you look at the PlayStation 5 footage of it, and he points it out here too as well. So let's go ahead and fast forward to. There was another scene. So let's talk about models here, right? So let me go here. So everybody, there's a lot of controversy with the whole model of the new Peter Parker, but hey, you know what? When you're playing the game, he's going to be in a suit anyway. So, but what's interesting is, with the PlayStation 5, they're talking about, they can do better facial models to tie with the the voice acting. Well, when you look at the PlayStation 4 model and you look at the PS5 model, I mean, it really shows that the PlayStation 4 was still very capable of rendering 3D models. To me, from just looking at the PlayStation 5 footage, I'm not seeing any higher poly count in the facial detail. And if anything, the PS4 model, in my opinion, looks much more defined with his facial structure, whereas the PlayStation 5, this new face model, definitely looks a lot younger. To me, he doesn't look like he's in his early 20s. He looks like he's in high school. So it's very interesting that they noted that with the PlayStation 5, with the power, they would be able to increase better fidelity with the modeling. But to me, I think the PlayStation 4 and the engine that they've used, the modeling on the characters are pretty good already. I think if anything, I would wanted to see better high fidelity in the models. I mean, if you look at some of the examples of the Unreal Engine and the facial features that they've shown, you saw some pretty good next gen type of detail in the faces. In here, I think because of the engine that they're using for Spider-Man, you're not seeing that huge jump. So who knows, until Insomniac talks about technicalities and the tech specs of what are the models represent, right? How many polygons and things like that. You're not going to know visually just from looking from the outside. It doesn't look any much more higher than what they're already using already in the PlayStation 4. And again, and they're calling this a remastered. So other than changing the face and adding ray tracing in a performance mode, what have they really remastered in the original PlayStation version? And I'm not here to argue the remaster justify. If you like it, buy. If you don't. Hey, these are games. Enjoy them if you want to. Shouldn't be criticizing them. I mean, it's the direction of the creator, and it is what it is, right? To me personally, I think it could have been a contractual thing that they switch face models. It could be that whoever they got for the first face model of Peter Parker, maybe contractually they weren't able to lock that person in for the next couple of games, and maybe they pivot to this, right? So who knows? But I'm just gonna, hey, that's a Sony Insomniac decision, and you just got to live with it. They're the creators of the story, and if they want to change it up, that's their opinion to do so, and we have the right to have our opinion. And if you don't like it, don't buy the game. But if you like it, buy the game, support them, do whatever. Your actions is basically in buying the game is what's going to resonate more with Insomniac and Sony than trying to bitch about it on social media, right? So, so let's go on further and look at the comparison shots. And I'm going to pass this, but here's Dr. Octavius, right? So if it's going to be a remastered, you would expect a lot of improvements across the board. And let me tell you this. I mean, we're gamers here, and we follow this. But to the normal average consumer, they're not going to know or care, For us, we're going to care, but for the normal average consumer, they're not going to care. But just, look at this, right? If you look at the models between these, I mean, there's definitely some improved lighting models, some reflections here and there, but overall, what additional work did they put into other models other than Peter Parker, right, for this remastered? And to me, quite frankly, I don't see that. I think if you're going to label this as a remastered, and come on, we're remastering a game that's 2 years old. I can understand we're remastering a game that's 10 years old, but it's 2 years old, right? So that's why there's such huge controversy is because, a lot of these cross-generational games are getting these upgrades on these newer hardware on the PS5 and on the Xbox at no additional cost, because PC gamers have dealt with this for years, where you buy a game, you own it, and you're running it on a graphics card right now, and all of a sudden this new 3080 comes out, 3090, you buy that, you put that into your system, and you're going to get much better, higher fidelity, frame rate, textures, and features that you weren't able to run on the previous old video card, right? So it's the same kind of concept thrown into the PS5 and Xbox Series X type of a deal, where basically it's the same core game, and it's just getting improvements. So if they're doing a remaster, then maybe I'd like to see, again, much more overhaul on the engine, some additional things that they're adding in. I mean, lighting, ray tracing is one thing, but that's hardware, and that can be implemented with a lot of games that are already being currently developed that are cross-gen, right? So to me, I'm not too impressed with this. I mean, it's I was still very blown away by the PS4 version of Spider-Man. So the PS5 version, other than some of those features I told you about in the beginning, when it comes to ray tracing, the performance mode in 60 frames, and the resolution, there's really nothing else that they really remastered other than swapping the face model for Peter Parker, right? So it's a very interesting thing. But hey, for $20 more, get the Ultimate Edition, and again, this next generation, we're paying an extra $10 for these newer games, right? So. But here was a good example. They, it's a very not busy scene. They're able to add a higher texture onto the rug. So that's the thing about games, right? In very controlled scenes, you're able to add more fidelity when it comes to visually. But then when it comes to busy scenes, you're not going to be able to do that. There's a cost benefit with what has to be put into play. So. Let's see here. There was another scene I wanted to kind of compare, and let me fast forward. And this has been screenshotted a lot in the on social media. So here we go. So here's the shot, ray tracing, right? So with ray tracing on, you're getting really good reflections with ray tracing, and you're probably not going to see ray tracing in the 60 frames per second mode. But if you look at this, at quick glance, you're like, wow, that looks amazing. You see the reflection of Spider-Man here. But let's go deeper dive into the actual reflections. Look at the reflections of the trees and the street and the environment onto the actual glass here, right? Now, if you look at it, look at the foliage. The trees are much more thinner and sparse compared to this luscious textures of the trees and the leaves that are on the game side of it versus the reflection. And this is where the developers are going to use these tricks to give you reflections. Just focus on the main object here, which is Spider-Man, right? So when this is moving in full 30 frames per second with ray tracing on, unless you're looking for it, you're not going to notice this, right? So for me, I'm going to notice it just because I'm a technical guy and I'm looking at all aspects of the scene. But your normal average consumer is not going to even care. They're just going to be engrossed in the action and the current state of the game, that they're not going to be paying attention to, oh, these leaves aren't rendered exactly 1:1, or the cars aren't rendered exactly 1:1. So it's again, this is early footage. This is the first footage that Sony's released of the PlayStation 5 version of Spider-Man. But we're allowed to dissect it, and who knows, in the final form they might be able to improve this. But this is something I just wanted to point out, that there's a cost and a balance to the game when it comes to performance and the visual fidelity, right? You have the visual fidelity, and then you have the actual fidelity, the movement side, right? Where you get the high frame rates. And, everybody is trying to figure out, what do you want? You want the high visual, or you want the high frame rate? It depends on the games. For competitive games, first-person shooters, you want the high frame rate, in order for response time. But for adventure games, RPGs, you might want the higher fidelity for the visual versus the frame rate, right? But ultimately, I like to see a balance. I think for this next generation, it'd be great if developers on Sony, on Microsoft, on third party, really baseline 60 frames per second, and then start building their games off of the 60 frames per second baseline for visual, for movement fidelity from a frame rate standpoint, and then from there start looking into how they can put the visual art form together based on that 60 frames per second baseline. I think for some developers, that's going to be a great medium to get 60 frames and get the visual. Others might feel that, hey, 30 frames is fine, but it's tough. Once you start playing games at 60 frames or higher, it's very hard to go back to anything less than 60 frames, just because response time, movements, and things like that. So I wanted to kind of point out this in particular, aspect of Spider-Man, where if you're going to have ray tracing on, and this is going to be on the visual side, not the performance side, you are going to get, there's the pros and there's the con, and this is going to happen with every game. I'm not just picking on Spider-Man. It's going to happen with a lot of third-party games, a lot of first-party games on Sony, a lot of first-party games on Microsoft. So it's not just related to Spider-Man. It's just showing you the aspect. And in a way, the business decision side of developing a game, and what do you prioritize over the other, right? So it's very interesting here. And then there was another scene I thought that was pretty interesting. Let me see here. I think it's over here where he's going through the crane, and you can kind of see the side building. And let me see if I can find that one shot that goes into some texture detail and some lighting here. Just waiting for it to load. Here we go. Here, this is the scene right here, right? So on the right, you have the PlayStation 5. On the left, you have the PS4. Now look at the awning over here, right? So this is in performance mode, I'm assuming, because you're moving at 60 frames per second in this scene. But look at the back texture. Look at some of the. It's very soft shadowing, which is very natural. But look at the awning back here. You're seeing not a lot of fidelity on there because you're in performance mode. And then over here in the PS4, where we didn't get 60 frames per second, we got 30. You can see the visual fidelity there. So expect to see this in the PS5 version when you're not running in performance mode. High, quality textures, high resolution, some very good detail in the environments and things like that. So I just want to point that out to kind of show you there's a balance, right? So again, in the whole grand scheme of thing, when you're playing the game, are you going to be paying attention to every little detail with this? Probably not. You're going to be engrossed and focusing in the center of the action, which is Spider-Man, the mechanics of battling and things like that. You're not going to really care about the background. And that's where developers have learned to really balance and tweak their games. I think one thing we can wait for is an analysis with this particular user on YouTube, or possibly with Digital Foundry when the final version of Spider-Man comes out. It'll be interesting to see the comparisons one-on-one in terms of performance, frame rate, and visual fidelity. And you guys make that decision on how you guys want to play the game. For me, when I get the game, I'm going to be personally running it in performance mode just because I want to play it in 60 frames per second. I think visually already it looks stunning. And I think we're definitely going to be getting there with games in terms of running at 60 frames and 4K. So you'll see a few future games that will support that. For me, it's great to see and play games on the PlayStation 5 and on the Xbox Series X with these high fidelity settings, whether it's frame rate or visual. And then I'm still waiting for my 3080 to come in so I can play some of the PC games that I'm waiting for with a high fidelity. I think the next game that's a cross-generational game that's going to be fun to analyze would be Cyberpunk, and see when they release those packs for the next gen consoles to play at the high resolution and the higher frame rate. But hey, I have a backup with my PC with my 3080, so it's gonna be a great time to be a gamer, So so this video was just focusing on some of the very minor details and kind of point out the difference between performance mode and the standard, visual fidelity mode that the game's going to offer. And again, this is just an early analysis of what was publicly being shown by Sony. Who knows if this becomes improved? It changes when the final version comes out. I mean, we're a month away from the PlayStation 5 launching and the Xbox Series X, so it's getting close. A lot of the builds that you're seeing now, in public should be close to final. It would be hard pressed for them to show a build that's like months before, right? So yeah, if you guys like the video, go ahead and hit like and subscribe to the channel. I normally talk gaming and try to give a more business-centric perspective to a lot of things that are happening in gaming, and also examine the technical aspects of decisions that are being made. So this is a quick video on just comparison and looking at the Spider-Man PlayStation 5, comparing it to the PlayStation 4. So yeah, let me know your thoughts. Post your comments down below and I'll be happy to answer them. So with that, thank you guys and have a great day. I'll see you guys later.